Originating from Music City, USA, through the facilities of Studio A located on the campus of historic Belmont University, Nashville, Tennessee, we present this interview as conducted July the 26th, 1995 by Nashville Network producer and reporter Jimmy Carter and his guest, stage companion, and personal confidant to the late Elvis Presley, Mr. JD Sumner. Now here with JD Sumner is your host, Jimmy Carter.
JD, can you believe you've made a living all these years out of doing something that you really love so much?
It's the most wonderful thing in the world. I've said many times I'll pay to sing any time, and the fact that I've been able to make a living, feed my family, doing something that I love is, I don't think anybody could be blessed any more than that.
When did you know it was going to be your life calling? I mean, you probably were singing from when you were a little kid, but when did you really know you could make a living out of it?
Well, of course, when I was 4 years old, my mother told me that Mr. Frank Stamps came to our camp meeting. I was raised in a Pentecostal church, and he come down and sang Stand By Me, and my mother said that from that day on, I always said I was going to be a bass singer in a gospel quartet. So
I would have loved to have heard you cry as a little boy. When did you know you had that voice? I mean, was it even when, did you wait till the voice changed when you were an adolescent, or was it there even earlier?
It was there earlier. I don't even remember a voice change. Of course, my voice wasn't this low, but I don't remember a voice change. I was singing bass, and the ladies, I had 3 ladies singing bass when I was 8 years old. I don't remember a voice change.
Was your granddaddy or your daddy a bass singer?
No, nobody in my family. My brother was, he's a good singer, but he's not a professional singer, but all my family sings, but nobody ever sang professionally but me. But I've been a blessed man.
I was wondering who gave you the bug. Was it your mother singing to you probably when you were a baby, or just the church activities?
No, the church activity. Back in those days, anybody sung in the choir wanted to, and when they had that choir singing on Sunday night, I was in the choir singing. Just something I loved. I was raised in Florida, and they had a lot of these singing conventions down there. You go to every Sunday they had a singing convention. So I was just into singing from the time I was just a kid up until now.
And those all-night sings, I remember passing by places that had those. There must be some great memories.
Oh, yeah. They just put out a video on the Blackwood Brothers. I was with them for years, and Bill Gaither just put out a video on them that, man, it brought back a lot of memories sitting and watching that video that for the years that I sung with the Blackwoods, a lot of good times.
Was there a lot of competition between those groups, healthy competition or even unhealthy competition? Did you feel that Florida boys were up against so-and-so?
Oh, yeah, it was very competitive. When you went to a show, you tried to outdo one another, and it's still that way. It's the way it should be. I mean, as long as if it's not competitive, it'd be like 2 baseballs. It'd be like the Yankees and the Mariners going out and playing and didn't care who won. You know, it's the same thing in our field. You want to beat everybody there that night.
Music today is a little different in the Christian world, isn't it?
Well, they're trying to make it different. I don't go along with it.
I mean, there's still pure gospel.
Yeah.
Not maybe enough of it, but there's pure gospel. And then what do you think about this contemporary Christian music?
Well, you know, I have nothing against it. It's reaching young people where my music does not anymore, not all the time. And as long as it reaches young people, then I'm for it. I'm not a contemporary singer myself, but I'm a Give the World a Smile singer. That's Southern gospel, but I'm for it.
You know, looking back in, say, the 40s and 50s, when race was, I'm from Montgomery, Alabama, and race was a big deal in the South, but I always saw that in music that was a common denominator. There were no race problems among musicians, and white people listened to black music was corresponding with white music. Did you find that in the world of gospel?
Especially gospel.
I mean, my goodness, the black gospel singers, you know, of today and yesterday.
Oh, yeah, we sung, you know, always the black quartets, Take the Spirit of Memphis and the Five Blind Boys. I've been on many programs with them, and you're right, it's
colorblind.
Yeah, it's colorblind when it comes to music, and that's what music is for. I think it reaches the heart of people and takes all that kind of stuff out of you. You know,
you've been kind of a daddy figure to a lot of people, hadn't you? I don't know if you ever decided that was your role somewhere along the lines, but you've raised a lot of people in the music business.
Yeah, I've had a lot of the people that's been in my quartet, this, that, and the other. Tony Brown came to me when he was 17 years old, and had Richard Sturban and Dave Rowland with Dave and Sugar, and had Larry Strickland. I always said that all these people had a lot of talent, but Larry, and he married his, and then maybe he did have some talent after all. I don't know. But I've had a lot of good people with me.
Did Elvis kind of look upon you as a grandfather, father type figure?
Daddy figure. Elvis would always talk to me anytime something was serious. He came to me and we'd taken Knoxville one time. We was playing Knoxville, and that's when he and Priscilla was getting a divorce, and Elvis called me into the room. He said, JD said, I can't talk with Daddy. He said, Daddy's too squirrely. Now, I don't mean that he was crazy. He wasn't running his daddy down, but he said, Daddy's too squirrely. Because Vernon would go from one subject to the other. He wouldn't stay on one subject. He said, where did I go wrong with Priscilla? And he said, it's the only thing I ever wanted that I couldn't have was Priscilla. So where did I go wrong? I said, well, in the first place, they say that a woman's home is her castle. I said, Priscilla never had a home. You had 20 bodyguards sitting outside the bedroom, and she couldn't even come out without being fully dressed out of her bedroom. And I said, you should have had those bodyguards on the outside the house, and you and Priscilla lived in the house. And then again, I said, my life is 60% show business and 30% my business activities outside of show business, because I was in the bus business then, and 10% is for my family. I said, in your case, I said 10% is very little to scatter around between your family, my wife and 2 daughters. And I said, in your case, 99% of your life is show business, and that just leaves 1% for your daddy, Priscilla, your grandmother. And I said, that's pretty thin.
See, that's the part I don't understand. Here is a guy who loved his mother more than anybody could ever love a mother. They had a strong family, and you would think that he would try to emulate his family life in his own life as an adult, but it didn't seem to work that way.
Well, show business is a little bit different when you get somebody like Elvis Presley. I mean, you know, one time I was staying at a high school up in Missouri, and an old minister come up to me. He wasn't maybe 50 years old. He's older than I was at that time, and he, at that time, they had just put a picture of me and Elvis in Life magazine, and I had made some quotes that Elvis was a good boy, that I never had seen him smoke and never had heard him cuss, and that was the truth. And this man come up to me and he said, don't tell me that he's a good boy. He said, all them women coming over them footlights trying to get to him. And I said, in the first place, the boy is single. He's a young man, and just because they're crawling over the footlights, that doesn't hurt his character. I said, I wonder how many you've had crawling over footlights after you in the last 10 years. Of course, his pants was up about around his ankles, and I said, I doubt you've even had one to turn a second look. But when you was Elvis Presley, and you could basically have almost any woman you wanted, that changes the ball game pretty much. I mean, that changes from Vernon and his mama. So that life is a rough life to live.
It's a corrupting life, isn't
right.
it?
Absolutely. It's just, people can say it ain't, but it is. I mean, it brings in a whole different ball game.
And no one's really prepared educationally or anyway to take on that kind of bright light. No one's been able to really do it, or very few have.
No, you take the prettiest women in the world, come on at you, and you on the road 20 days, and it gets to be pretty rough.
You know, Priscilla, that was a love affair. I think she loved him and he loved her. And then whatever happened, they went apart. I've always thought that there was a great love affair that we don't know about to this day with Anne Margaret. I know there may have been a brief love affair, but I think there was really some love there.
Yeah, there was some deep love there. Anne Margaret was at his funeral, and she cried like a baby. Yeah, there was some
mean, that's more than just being a friend that worked in a movie.
Right. They were. I wouldn't even say that they were lovers, but I really, just like you say, that in my life, I know you can love more than one woman. I've been in love with more than my wife, and there definitely was a deep love there for Anne Margaret.
Because she won't talk about it still. You know, she did this big expose book and basically left that out for all practical purposes.
Yeah, but you could, if you'd have been at that funeral, you could tell it pretty well. There's a deep love there for Elvis.
But Elvis never got over Priscilla.
No. Well, you know, Anne Margaret and Priscilla was good friends. I mean, but Elvis loved Priscilla, but he allowed those around him to. They had a rule that wives could come on the opening in Las Vegas and be there on the closing, but they couldn't be there during the time of the show. And Elvis more or less carried that through with the Priscilla. And I did not with my wife, because Elvis told me, he said, if you want to bring your wife, you bring her. But that was the rule, that nobody could bring their wife, only on opening and closing. And there was a reason for that, because there was a lot of activity between the two. And but I had my wife with me a lot of times, because she was a special lady. And I'm not telling you that I was good. I was just as bad as they are. But a lot of times
Elvis was not an angel.
No,
correct?
No, neither was JD Sumner.
None of us are. But I mean, for those that want to deify Elvis, he was a man. He had
That's
all
right.
the faculties of a man, and he had all the good points and the bad points. He was tempting.
Well, you take one time he took me out on the balcony there of the Hilton on the 30th floor, and you could see Las Vegas. And he was just trying to get over something to me. He said, JD, how would you feel if you could buy everything you can see? And man, that really impressed me. I went back downstairs. I was on the 28th floor, and I opened up the drapes to my room and saw on the marquee out there said Elvis with great big letters, and down at the bottom it said JD Sumner and the stamps. And I actually got on my knees and asked God to never let my name be on top. That's a bad place.
If I flew you to Las Vegas tonight, what's the first thing you would think of when you saw the Hilton?
Well, the day you're there with Elvis. I mean,
is there a particular memory, a particular night?
Well, we had so many.
The first night probably was a pretty wild one, the comeback night, when all the movie stars were there, and he was scared to death. Wasn't he scared?
Yeah, he was always nervous. He was always nervous before he went on stage, and of course there was stars there every night. I mean, almost every night of his show. I mean, Sammy Davis Jr. was a regular tender, and Red Skelton, Dean Martin, all these people.
You know, a lot of these people claim to be Elvis's friends, and who of that showbiz crowd really did he think was pretty good? Tom Jones? I think he claims to have an association with Elvis.
Tom was good friends with Elvis, and Sammy Davis Jr. was. I forget the guy that was $1 Million Man. Used to.
Well, what do we mean by friends here? I mean, what does a friend mean? If you're a friend to Elvis Presley, what does that mean on that level? He didn't hang out with people. He didn't go to restaurants. I mean, what did he do with a friend?
Well, what I call a friend with Elvis, they would come a lot of times to the show, and they would come downstairs to the dressing room after it was over and visit, and Elvis enjoyed visiting with them. And that's, you're right, what is a friend, and what are they for? But
his friends were his people he grew up with, pretty much, right?
Well, his friends was the people that was around him. He more or less selected his friends, and thank God I was one of his friends, and but even everybody that worked for him wasn't his friends. He didn't like everybody that worked for him. He told me he had some of the people working for him just so he could keep them away from him. Said that's when I pay him, I can tell him what to do and keep him out of my hair.
I always thought a friend was somebody who could tell you no and to tell you when you're doing wrong. Did he have any of those people? Obviously not nearly enough.
I don't.
I mean, he truly had yes men around him, didn't he?
I talked to him about, and when I talked to him, he turned around and talked to me about the things I was doing back in those days. I tried to drink all the whiskey there was in Las Vegas, and I never did do any of the rest of it. I never did take any pills or anything like that. But like one time they Joe Esposito told me that Elvis's whiskey bill was $15,000 when he left the Hilton. It was over $15,000, and Elvis didn't even drink. But he had a bar down in his dressing room. He had a bar upstairs, and they would come and they charged $50 and $60 a bottle for that stuff, and they would buy that much in the bottle. They'd take it away. And but if you wanted to say something about Elvis, say, well, man, no wonder he died. His whiskey bill was $15,000. But I said it couldn't have been, because I drank $14,000 worth myself, But he never drank at all.
A theory is that Elvis is dead today because Colonel Tom Parker had him work 2 shows a night in Las Vegas. That messed him up so badly that when you're a performer like Elvis Presley that gave it all, you couldn't do 2 shows. 1 show was more than enough.
I don't agree with that at all. Elvis done 2 shows a night for 4 weeks, but he wasn't out there but an hour at the time on each show, and he enjoyed every minute of it. I don't think anything you enjoy as much as Elvis did sing, I don't think it'd kill you. Wayne Newton has been doing the same thing Elvis done for a lot longer than Elvis. Wayne Newton is still doing it, and actually Wayne really works harder than Elvis works, and the Colonel didn't kill Elvis with 2 shows a night. I mean, Elvis loved that stuff.
Well, some say that because his sleeping got all messed up, he didn't know his night from his days and that kind of thing.
Well, of course, that's true. I mean, they had to black out every hotel room he stayed in. They had to black it out. That comes from when you wind up a show at 12 or 1 o'clock, you got to wind down. You have to stay up 3 or 4 hours before you can go to sleep. It's the same thing when you get through working. You just don't go and jump into bed and go to sleep.
I try sometimes. I'm better than I used to, but if you're really wound up, you've been on stage and sweating, and it's like exercise. Right. You can't fall asleep after you exercise. And that's an exercise thing, doing what he did, particularly wearing those costumes.
Yeah, and we stayed up. I stayed up many a night talking to him till 8 o'clock in the morning, and that's what he would do. He would talk, and I've been in his room many nights, all night long, and surprisingly talking about Jesus Christ. I mean, he loved to talk about that more than anything.
And why do you think that is?
He had that. Elvis was a very religious man. He was very dedicated. Elvis was a Christian. He believed in Jesus Christ. He even asked Rex Humbard one time, he said, do you think I should sing nothing but gospel music? And Rex said, by no means. He said, you till the soil for people like us to plant the seed. He said that you have JD and the Stamp sing gospel, and then when you sing your gospel, which is How Great Thou Art and a lot of the songs that he sung, he said, you're tilling the soil for people like us to plant the seed. But Elvis has got my group together and preached to us. I mean, absolutely preached a sermon to us. Now, he knew the Bible. He read the Bible a lot. He read other religious books about other religions, but he knew the Bible. One of his things was, you take the word devil, take the D off of it, and it's evil. And Genesis, take the IS off, and it's genes, the beginning of the Bible and the beginning of man. And he'd say, take the word woman, means woe man, be careful how you choose a wife. And he got that from some Pentecostal preacher, didn't he? I bet. Some late night on the radio, he was listening around, and that's where he got that stuff. But he would preach. I mean, he come in with our dressing room one time and put my boys up on to sit down there. It was on Sunday night, and he absolutely preached a sermon. I mean, he left to do that. And a little girl come to me one time in Vegas, and she said, I come up there after the show every night. She said, Elvis wants me to talk to you. And I said, well, honey, I don't know what about, but sit down, we'll talk. And she said, I never thought that I would get to go to one of his concerts. I never even had the idea that I would be able to meet him. And then to think that I got to go in and spend the night with Elvis Presley. Said, you know what we done? I said, I got a pretty good idea. I said, you listen to gospel music and talked about Jesus. She said, that's right. We didn't do nothing. And that wasn't what I went there for. I said, well, honey, that's Elvis Presley. And that happened so many times until you can't believe it. The bedroom wasn't, to him, it was just a place where he wound down and he wanted somebody to talk to, and he would play his gospel music. One of the things he loved to hear before he went to sleep was "In the Sweet By and By." You know, it helped put him to sleep. Absolutely.
I think people like Elvis, they're really so intriguing, and I think that's why we're still here talking about him today. I mean, I've met a few people over the years that had that X quality, and I don't think it was because they were rich or because they were whatever. John Wayne had it. Bear Bryant had it in my lifetime,
yes, sir.
And Elvis Presley had it. Now, there have been others that I met. Ronald Reagan had it. But it's just something about them when they come into a room, all the eyes go there. They're electric. They have a kind of magic around them.
There's another person with them. I mean, Elvis could walk in this room and you and I wouldn't even know that he was the Elvis, but he would have that charisma. And what it is, it's a really heavy charisma. Elvis always said charisma is Christ within. And Elvis carried that love. I mean, everywhere he went, he could not stand for anybody to be mistreated or anything. He'd go to them and hug their neck. Any girl that was mistreated, well, he would go out of his way. He was just the kindest man that I ever met.
But he didn't have that charisma when he was 14, whenever you met him, when he was coming through the back door of those gospel sings.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. He, of course, he was a kid, and
was he a nice boy?
Oh yeah, he was.
I mean, kind of a sweet boy, nice boy, very kind man.
Yeah. Yes, sir. No, sir. Elvis said yes or no, sir, to me, even after I started working for him for 2 or 3 years. He was yes or no, sir.
Because that's how he met you in an authority type figure, and you were always that way.
And I don't think it hurt anything to say this, but I went to him and I told him, I said, Elvis, don't. He called me Mr. Sumner. I said, don't call me Mr. Sumner. I said, and say yes or no. So I said, it's a little bit embarrassing. And so he said, well, what do you mean to call you, son of a bitch? I said, well, I'd rather you call me that than I had Mr. Sumner. He said, okay. So he did that from then on. And if he didn't do that, I knew something was wrong. You know, and that may sound strange to people, but I'd come up, he said, why you say you old son of a bitch? You know, but he didn't mean that. And when he said, why you say JD, I knew that our relationship wasn't quite to par, and I could almost tell you why. But when he called me the other, well, we was in good shape.
Do you think when the little baby was born, little Lisa Marie, did he really change, or was he still too young and immature to grasp what fatherhood was?
Well, of course, I don't know whether Elvis, of course, he did grasp fatherhood, but I don't know whether it was ever as serious with him as it is some people. There again, I say, when you get that 99%, your life is 99% show business, and you got 1% to divide between Lisa Marie and Priscilla and Vernon. Well, it's pretty thin.
That's amazing that, you know, I guess people who do make it, whether it's in politics, music, or any other form of endeavor, sports, you do have to be 99% dedicated. And I think that's what most people don't understand about successful people, is how obsessed they are with what they do in a positive and a negative way.
That's the reason they make it. If you ain't,
they are driven.
Right. If you're not 99%, what you're doing, when you're not going to make it, you take me. I have been many times. My wife was operated on a couple of times. I wasn't even in town. I was out singing. Both of my girls got married. I wasn't at their wedding because the quartet, or my job, was always number one with me, because that's the way I took care of my family. And it's still that way today. You take the day I buried my wife. She died about 2.5 years ago. I sung that night. I sung in Montgomery, Alabama that night at a concert. And I knew that's what she would want me to do. Because one time when she was dying with cancer, she said, I stayed at the hospital one night. She said, what are you doing here? Ain't you supposed to be singing? I said, yeah, but I thought I'd better stay with you. She said, you go and sing. You know, I don't want you here with me. So that's a way of life with people in show business.
And that's why your marriage may have worked, is that she did have to know how to put up with
That's
you.
right. Yeah,
and she accepted what you did. And
I was reading 51 and a half years that I was married,
she had to be a very tolerant woman.
She
had to be a saint, probably, in your
Thank
case.
God. Thank God.
And Priscilla, maybe she just couldn't put up with it anymore? Is that what it was about?
Well,
I mean, because it had to be embarrassing her. I think he was not really flaunting it in front of other people, but it could, she had to have some self-esteem there.
yeah, that's the worst thing, I think, is the embarrassment. And then, you see, Elvis got her to start taking karate lessons from Mike Stone. And Elvis had gone all the time, and you start that kind of thing. Well, a lot of things goes with it. And Elvis should have known. When I was out of town, I didn't want no man teaching my wife karate.
Have you watched any of those TV movies they've done about him over the last few years? There have been a lot. Kurt Russell did Elvis. Everybody's done Elvis. You seen any of those things?
Yeah, I've seen some of them.
Because that's how history is perceived now. People watch these made-for-TV movies, and they think that is the story.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything that really needs to be straightened out by that, or do you think it's pretty, the gist of it is correct?
Well, of course.
About his life and about his everything.
A lot of that stuff they do, and it's true, but they don't explain. You take Elvis shot out TVs. We was watching TV one afternoon in Asheville, North Carolina, and all of us tried to adjust it, and it kept rolling and splitting, and we was trying to watch a football game, and Elvis said, "Joe, go get my gun," and Joe went and got his gun. He said, "Everybody back off." So he just shot the thing 3 times. And that sounds like he's an idiot, but
haven't we all wanted to do that, though?
Oh man, I would deny it if I could afford it. It's like me.
I'd have shot the Jenny Jones show the other day myself. I mean, those talk shows make you want to go shoot the TV. But Elvis when you need it.
It's like a cigarette lighter to me. It costs 98 cents. If it don't light, I'll throw it away and get another one.
But he would just shoot the TV. Now, what's the big story about? He shot Robert Goulet on there one night or something?
Yeah, he shot Robert Goulet one morning.
Because he didn't want to become Robert Goulet, or what was the story on that?
Well, Robert Goulet was singing when he was trying to have his breakfast, and Robert Goulet, woo, and Elvis just pulled out his gun and shot him. So I want to hear that so-and-so sing while I'm eating breakfast.
I mean, was Elvis a rather persuasive individual? Persuasive because he had the power, or just that was his personality, or what? I'm trying. I still, I think a lot of people still don't understand this man. I know he had to be different from the time he was a teenager and then on his way up. But once he had all this power, where he could fly people around and just give away cars and do all that, what kind of person was he? You say he was still a good yes sir, no sir guy to the people who were his elders, but he obviously was a very powerful man, and you didn't want to get on his wrong side. I know that.
Well, I never seen him use that power. Of course, you're right. He did have the power, but I never seen him use it on anybody.
Weren't there certain musicians he didn't like or something? He wouldn't have them around anymore, or people were...
Oh, yeah. He just wouldn't let them come around. I mean, of course, he was very protected, and it was very easy to keep somebody away from you that he didn't want to see you. If he liked you, if he loved you, he loved you, and if he didn't want to be around you. I mean, it was just that simple. And a lot of the musicians that he'd been down through the years, hard feelings here or there, I suppose, well, he just had no time for them.
Let's talk about Elvis the musician. Not magician, but musician. He was a magician, too, because I think the way he attacked people. But was he a good singer, technically, you think? I think he was a fine singer, of course, and we all obviously bought his records. But on a technical viewpoint, was it easy for him to get in the studio and hit that note and go?
Well,
you have to work at it.
The longer he lived, the better singer he was. I did not like Elvis's singing when he first started. He had too much vibrato, a little bitty shake in his voice. But the older he got, you take from 1970 on until he died, his voice kept getting bigger. He kept learning how to sing correctly all the time, and that's when when he started singing My Way and those big songs. Elvis could sing that stuff. All he could sing was Hound Dog.
Did he work at that? I mean, work at this craft like everybody?
Yeah. He, I helped Elvis a lot. Other singers helped him a lot on hitting notes and how to hit notes, and he used that. I mean, there was a guy in our business by the name of Leroy Abernathy that if Elvis could have, he had planned to bring Leroy to work with him on his voice, because, I mean, Elvis never had a voice lesson in his life. He just sung because he wanted to sing. But the older he got, the better he sung.
And some say he would have been a great actor. I think that's very possible. He played a lot. I still like those cheesy movies he did, because they're still fun to watch. But I think he had a lot more talent than people ever really wanted to realize. It was a lot more than just shaking up there with Elvis Presley.
Oh yeah. Elvis could have been a good actor, and that's one thing he wanted to do was to prove that he could act without singing. But he never was allowed to. All of his pictures was built around his singing and shaking, this, that, and the other, and that's why he quit making them. That's why he detested them before it was all over. Well, he decided he wouldn't make any more pictures unless he could be acting, and that's the only thing he wanted to do. No singing.
Colonel Tom Parker, he's the man that not enough people talk about. He was the brains, in many cases. I'd say you could say he's the brains behind Elvis Presley, who made him a star. Elvis certainly made himself a star through hard work and talent, but how do you see Colonel Parker's role?
Well, of course, a lot of people have disagreed with me, but the biggest, prettiest diamond in the world once was a chunk of coal. That chunk of coal had to be found, the first place. And it had to be cut, it had to be polished, and it had to be showcased. And Elvis never would have been Elvis without the Colonel, because the Colonel knew exactly what to do and when to do it, and he was a very intelligent man when it came to show business. He would do things that even to me was crazy, but Elvis Presley was the biggest man in the world. I don't think he would have been without the Colonel.
Did he listen to the Colonel?
Oh yeah.
On matters of business?
Yeah, he'd get mad once in a while, but he still listened to the Colonel, because he knew the Colonel knew what he was doing.
Could he have fired the Colonel technically? I mean, was he contractually bound to the Colonel?
Yeah, they had a contract, but at one time there, Vernon, Elvis' daddy, wanted to get rid of the Colonel, but Elvis wouldn't do that, because he knew that the Colonel knew what he was doing, and the Colonel, if it hadn't been for, he just wouldn't go along with his daddy. His daddy even, I think, went to deal with the Colonel for $7 million to buy the contract, but Elvis wouldn't do it. I mean,
Colonel was more than a 10%er, wasn't he?
Oh, he was a 50%er.
See, That's a strange management. I mean, that's almost would be an illegal management situation today.
Right. Yeah, he got 50% of what Elvis made, and
did he earn that 50%?
Well, when you get down, if he's the one that made Elvis, I disagree with the 50%. I more or less think of 25%, something like that. But that's the deal they made, and Elvis certainly made Elvis told me, he said, I made $4 million the first year I was in show business, and it got worse every year since then. So he made a lot of money.
Yeah, because Colonel, his story hasn't been told, I think, completely yet. I mean, some people, what's the take on the Colonel with some people? They think that he took advantage of Elvis and his generosity and his lack of education and business smarts.
Well, I think the Colonel took advantage of Elvis, not from the standpoint. I think from the standpoint of, his expenses was paid before they split the 50-50. And Elvis it was too. And so Elvis's expenses was kept down much. The Colonel had expenses that was very unnecessary, and that's the only place that I think the Colonel might have done wrong was in the expense account.
Did Elvis have a business mind, really, or he didn't care about that?
No,
he cared less as long as he had it.
From the time he was a kid until he died, he never had a dime in his pocket, never had a dollar in his hand. I mean,
money didn't mean really anything to him. He never had it, and really never had it.
Right, it did. That's the reason he gave it away. They said he made over $4 billion in his life and gave over half of it away. That's all he wanted to do was give money.
Some say that if Elvis had lived another year or so, that he would have had to declare bankruptcy.
Nah.
You don't think that? Because he was spending so much more than he was making, and that was one of the reasons why he was going back on tour and some of that kind of thing.
Well, no, that's true now, but as far as having a lot of things would have had to have changed. I know in August one year, we was playing Las Vegas, and we canceled out the rest of the engagement because his liver, Elvis had cirrhosis of the liver, and his liver count got up too high. and they brought him back to Memphis and put him in the hospital. In fact, I stayed with him in the hospital, me and my wife, because he was scared to death. And from August until December 31st, he had $750,000 in he had a fund account. That was his fund account. Elvis spent $750,000 from August until December 31st. And that's the reason that the Colonel booked that Pontiac, Michigan Silverdome concert where he had 68,000 people, because Elvis was broke in his fund account. And there was other accounts that he was not broke in.
What's Elvis's thing with jewelry? What was that all about?
With who?
Jewelry. Rings, chains, TCB necklaces. What was all that about?
He just loved jewelry, and he loved to buy it, and he gave me 11 rings in my life. One of them was $40,000 that he paid $40,000 for. He loved to give rings away. He just, if he'd see somebody, and one night a friend of mine was in the audience and was kept hollering at Elvis, and Elvis said, "What do you want?" And he said, "I want a ring," and Elvis just pulled off a very expensive ring and just threw it out there to him, which is really foolish on my part. But he gave, every time he saw me, just about, he gave me a ring. I had rings run out my ears,
So what was his fascination with giving? That's just, he just felt like he was Santa Claus, and he liked to watch people feel good after he gave them something?
Yeah, he
liked to watch their reaction?
Yeah, one night there was 26 people at his house, and of course they stayed up all night and partying. And when the Cadillac place opened the next day, they were still all up having fun. He took 26 people down and bought them brand new Cadillacs.
I mean, was that his way of saying that he loved them, or just what? Why did he do that?
He just wanted to give them something. He just loved them and wanted to give them something. When he was down there, it was on Union there in Memphis, and there was a black lady and her son. Her son was out looking at the used cars on the Cadillac place. And Elvis told me that his mind went back to when him and his daddy used to come down on that same lot, and Elvis would get up in this automobile and drive it, when he's a little kid. So he had them to stop his limousine. He got out and went over to that used car department, and he told this black lady, he said, "Ma'am," he said, "I'm Elvis Presley. Would you love to have a new Cadillac?" She said, "Oh, Lord, Mr. Presley, sure." He said, "We'll go up there and pick out one you want, and you got you one." He bought that black woman and the little boy a brand new Cadillac. She said, "Lord, have mercy, Mr. Presley." Said, "Tomorrow's my birthday." Said, "This is the greatest birthday present I ever had." He said, "Nah, honey." He said, "Give me my checkbook, Joe." He said, he wrote a check for $5,000. Said, "That's for your birthday tomorrow." He said, that's kind of a man he was. It just made him feel good.
It's quite a good Christian doctrine about better to give than to receive.
Right.
Did anybody ever give him anything?
Oh, one time I done a foolish thing. I bought a $500 over there in Hawaii. I think it was his birthday. I know it was his birthday, and I bought a $500 piece of jade, that Chinese stuff, whatever it was. It was big old. He had it on one show his key if it fell on your chest, and I knew that he didn't. $500 present didn't mean nothing to him, so I never bought him anything else. I mean, he said, "Okay, thank you." I mean, you could tell that it takes more than a $500 piece of jade to impress a man that could buy anything he wanted.
Or certainly could sign his name and he could work for it and earn it back pretty quick.
Right.
Why do you think that we're still here today talking about him? What do you think we're here for? I mean, what is it about Elvis that's just so fascinating that we still like to talk about it and hear things?
Well, I know why I do, but I wished I could figure out why the Elvis Presley today is probably bigger than he was when he was alive.
Graceland's made more money since he's died than before he died.
Oh yeah, they're making more money, and this may be cruel to say this, but he's not here to spend it. And but why 7, 8, 9-year-old kids will go to Graceland today and stand around that grave and cry, and just absolutely are Elvis fans. Why in the world could a kid like that be an Elvis fan when they wasn't even born when he died, and it's getting bigger. I mean, it is not...
I mean, on one level, it's easy to say that when you were first with him that he was a young, virile, sexy man, and the women liked him because he was a sexy guy. But there was also something about him that the men didn't feel threatened by him, and we liked him. All right, I understand all that. That's very simple. But this has really turned into something else. I mean, some have even tried to say it's almost like a religion. You know, that people see him as some other kind of figure, you know, that they look up to him and things. I don't know. It gets very confusing and philosophical, but there's a lot more to this than just some guy who sang music.
It's all. It is. It's all. You talk about some of these cults. Elvis could have certainly had a cult. I mean, you know, it is almost like a religion. It's unbelievable to go over to Memphis today and see the people that's going through to see Graceland. And of course, we do a thing every January on his birthday with the symphony orchestra in Memphis, and that thing is packed out every year. 200 people at $25 a head. And who would have ever thought Elvis? They wouldn't have had Elvis at the Memphis Symphony Orchestra when he was living. But now, I mean, they're proud. I mean, they become Elvis fans, and those Memphis. I mean, the symphony people, which they're high class people. You know, they don't more or less go along with rock and roll, but they put on them tuxes and them long gowns and come out every January to see that, and we're supposed to take that thing worldwide too. That with like we coming here to Nashville next May, and with the Memphis Symphony Orchestra, and put on that same show here in Nashville. And
people forget that Elvis was more than just a United States factor, even though he never went anywhere except to Germany to go to the Army. He was such a, I mean, people in Japan, people in Denmark, I mean, it's as live today as it was in 1957.
Yeah, we just came from Paris, France, and done an Elvis program, and we're going to Hungary this year, Romania, and we'll have 80,000 people in the ballpark in Romania, and we'll do an Elvis concert. I'll talk about Elvis, and see, that's one thing that the Colonel would not let Elvis do, is go overseas. Because he didn't even have a passport, the Colonel himself. He was not an American. He's not an American citizen, so he really didn't have the ability or the credibility to get a passport from anybody. So he didn't want Elvis overseas. But Elvis bought the Lisa Marie. That was a big airplane, because Elvis told me, he said the Colonel wouldn't let him fly on a commercial airline. So Elvis bought the Lisa Marie for the purpose of going overseas. He said, I'm going next year with or without him. I'm going overseas to my fans. And he would have done it if he hadn't died. Now, he went where the Colonel wanted to go or not. But, you see, when you go on a long trip like it, you got to have enough gas to go and come back before you can fly a plane. I mean, you got to have enough to go to England and to come back, in case you can't land.
Well, you know, Elvis in these concerts, I mean, you look at how it was set up, it was you never got to have the privilege of really sitting out there like one of us in the audience, you know, and hear that dun 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 dun. I've never been to anything like that still. I mean, it's there've been a few entertainers that have come close, but that was a spooky thing when he had it. Whose idea was it to make this thing like a big deal, you know, the big build-up, and Elvis has left the building. I mean, who's responsible for the show business part of that presentation that made it so exciting and made the sound so full with the choir sound and all that?
Well, of course, Elvis was raised just like me in a Pentecostal church, and he wanted that choir sound behind him. That's why he had the black girls, and that's why he had the white quartet, was to give it that big choir sound. Yeah. And then I don't know what Joe Gershio wasn't responsible for that 2001. That's what you're talking about. Now, you thought it was exciting out there sitting in the audience. You should have been on stage. I mean, your skin just wouldn't stay anywhere. It was just crawling all over, you know. And but I don't know what Joe Gershio wasn't responsible for, the bigness of that band, you know.
Did you ever dream about all this stuff? If they ever entered your dreams at night, dream about Elvis or dream about being on stage, or any those flash bulbs going off and all those surrealistic things that probably seemed like a dream at the time?
Well, it was. I mean, when we was in Milwaukee, the first show I ever done with him, and I walked on stage, it seemed like to me that it was 20 million flashbulbs went off. Just you can't imagine looking at the audience, and it seems like everybody's got a camera. But since he died, I've had many dreams that he was back and sitting around laughing and giving concerts, being at his house. Many times I wished I didn't dream dreams like that because they seem so real. And I hope nobody don't get the idea that I go along that he's alive, because he's not alive, because I buried him. I was in charge of his funeral.
I just think people didn't want to think that he was gone. As simple as that. They wouldn't accept the fact that he was gone.
Well, he came here to that girl, Georgia, I think was her name, that sold 8 million books on that stuff. And it made me mad. And I went out to somebody called me and told me she was out at the store here signing autographs. The book that was selling out at some store out here, and it was 100 Oaks at that time. And so I went out there, and all the Elvis fans were lined up, and I walked up to where she was. Of course, the news people there from Channel 5 saw me and recognized who I was, and she was telling about this picture behind the door. She said, "Isn't that amazing?" And I said, "Yeah, it really is amazing." I said, "It's a D-lie." And she looked up and saw who I was, and it scared the heck out of her. But a girl come up to me and said, "Mr. Sumner," said, "we don't believe this, but we buy anything that's put out on Elvis. I don't care what it is." And said, I believe he's dead, but because this is about Elvis, we buy it. And she said, "Will you sign this?" And Georgia was sitting there. I said, "No, I won't." I said, "Well, maybe a second thought I will." So I wrote in each one of them, I said, "This book is a damn lie." And I signed JD Sumner. I was pretty mad. It was sort of kiddish for me to do that, but
I guess the worst one was Albert Goldman.
Yeah.
Is that probably the biggest thing that should be in the trash can?
Most ridiculous book I ever read in my life. He even interviewed me.
He interviewed he claimed to have 10,000 interviews or something in that book.
Oh yeah, but he took what I said and made a lie out of it. You take when some of the things I told him about happened on stage. A lot of times he would nod his head at Ed Enoch to hit a certain note, and for Ed to come on in, he had certain signs. And Elvis, would quit singing, and the voice would still be going. That was for show reasons. He'd nod to Ed, and Ed would come on into the mic where Ed could sound just like him. And Elvis would quit singing and direct the orchestra, whatever, go into karate, whatever he done. It wasn't because Elvis couldn't sing. That was just part of the show, But this Goldman said he couldn't sing and said he was gay and all that. If I could have found him, I'd have shot him myself. He dead now, but that was just a book completely full of lies.
Yeah, he did the same thing to John Lennon too. I think he worked over the Lennon memory.
Well, I can tell you a story, and you can take that and juice it up pretty well. And by the time you get through with it, it's a lie. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's what happened to that. One time, Esquire, what it was, one of those magazines, I told him, I said, "Now, if you don't put exactly what I say," in fact, it was over at Elvis's funeral, and they put in what I said exactly, and then they would put in something else below that, sort of crazy, and then down below that say, "Sumner also says," they quit up here, but it looked like I said the whole thing. But they can do anything they want.
Well, that's why a lot of stars won't talk to print people, because their stuff gets messed up, and they know that if they do something on television, even if they just run a little of it, is exactly what they said. Same way with audio tape. I mean, you can't really, you say what you say. I can edit it, but basically, I can only work with what you've got.
Well, I can
take you out of context.
That's right.
Easy.
Yeah, I mean, you can make me say things that ain't right, and it's dangerous. Yeah, a lot of people will not do things like that because. I've written a book on Elvis. It's a very positive book. I haven't tried to publish it. I just sell it to the Elvis fans when I go out on my concert. But I had to bring it back in and change it 3 times because this friend of mine, even though he was a friend of mine, he kept changing that thing and making lies out of it. And I said, no, that won't do. I bring it back down to earth,